Okay, it looks like we're live. Just give people a few seconds to arrive at our page since the clock just struck 12, and then we'll get started. Okay, we have a lot of people arriving at our page, so exciting. Let's give it just a few more seconds so people can catch up with us. Oh, my mom is watching. Hi, Mom. Okay, are you ready to get started, Lauren?
I'm ready, let's go.
Okay, great. Good afternoon to our viewers at home. I'm Joyce from the DeYoung social media team. Today is the 5th day of virtual Bouquets to Art. Thank you to everyone who has been following along all week and for your kind messages. It's our pleasure to bring the joy and beauty of Bouquets to Art to you at home during these uncertain times. Our special guest today is Lauren Palmor, Assistant Curator of American Art. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Our audience is in for a real treat today. I've spent countless hours in the galleries with Lauren, where she tells me the most interesting stories about the paintings and sculptures in our collection at the DeYoung. So I'm especially excited that we get to share this magic with you all at home this afternoon. So in the spirit of Bouquets to Art, Lauren will be teaching us about a few flower-filled paintings that we have at the DeYoung, particularly done by 2 phenomenal female painters in the American Art collection. Lauren, please take the stage and get us started.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Joyce. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today online. Of course, I wish we could be together in person, but this is the next best thing. My name is Lauren Palmor, and I am the Assistant Curator of American Art at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. When I was asked to speak for Bouquets to Art this year during Shelter in Place, I jumped at the opportunity to check in with some of my favorite floral paintings. Although we can't stand in front of these paintings together in person just yet, I do hope that you will be able to return to the museum soon. And perhaps when you do, you will find yourself seeking out these paintings like they're old friends that you want to revisit. So I'm going to get started, and I will now share my screen.
Okay.
Let's do it. Here we go. Here we are. I'd like to begin with a quote from the architect and designer Charles Rennie Mackintosh, which inspired the title of my talk. He said, quote, "Art is the flower, life is the green leaf. Let every artist strive to make his flower a beautiful living thing, something that will convince the world that there are things more precious, more beautiful, more lasting than life itself." Mackintosh's statement reminds us that throughout history, artists have sought to capture the beauty of flowers in order to make them last. Aside from their visual appeal, many floral subjects contain additional layers of symbolism and significance. The American Art Collection at the DeYoung Museum features a number of florals related to artists' ambitions and inspirations. From personal images of daily life and quiet reflection to global influences and international journeys, a rich variety of these narratives can be found on the gallery walls. Today, I invite you to join me as I discuss 2 of my favorite American modernists and their floral stories as we celebrate Bouquets to Art online. Florine Stettheimer's abstracted and joyous still life with flowers offers a compelling example of the artist's inimitable approach to floral subjects. A confident departure from realism, Still Life with Flowers depicts 2 floral arrangements, the larger of the two overflowing with fragrant, eye-catching phlox. Phlox come in a wide variety of colors and bloom from July through September, making them a popular feature in summer gardens. Perhaps some of our florists out there are growing some right now. In Stettheimer's composition, attention is paid not to the individual flowers, but to the sensation of viewing the bouquet as one joyous, tactile ensemble. And you'll see in this detail, I've called out the way in which Stettheimer's colors kind of emerge with texture from the canvas, blooming into the space of the viewer. Stettheimer painted flowers throughout her life, incorporating them into figurative compositions or using them as the focal point of still life paintings. Her friend, the art critic Henry McBride, wrote, quote, "Her colors instantly forgot that they came from the paint box and took on the tints of the flowers. When she painted flowers, she was never literal in her descriptions of them. The blossoms in her vases wriggled upward with a whimsicality in the stems." You see that whimsicality and that vibrancy, that live feeling in this still life that is in the collection of the Boston Athenaeum. Stettheimer lived in a rarefied world of beauty and creativity. Born into a wealthy family in Rochester, New York, she was the fourth of 5 children. The family moved comfortably between Europe and the United States, and she received her elementary schooling in Germany. She began her formal art training at the Art Students League in New York City, where she honed a distinct personal style that attests to her exposure to post-impressionism during her family's extensive European travels. She was particularly influenced by the work of Henri Matisse. I think this admiration is made especially clear in this comparison between Matisse's The Joy of Life in the Barnes collection in Philadelphia and Stettheimer's Heat of 1919, which you can see at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. It also happens to be one of my favorite paintings of all time. Together with her sisters Carrie and Eddie, Stettheimer socialized with contemporary artists and writers at the exhibitions and intellectual salons that the sisters hosted at their grand apartment on 58th Street in New York City. There, the Steadies mingled with such illustrious guests as Marcel Duchamp, Man Ray, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Alfred Stieglitz.
Their nickname were the Steadies?
Yeah, people would refer to the 3 sisters as the Steadies.
That is so cute. Thank you for bringing that to our life.
The 3 youngest sisters, the Steadies, never married, and their family's financial security allowed each to wholly devote herself to artistic pursuits. In order from left to right, Florine was a painter, of course, Eddie was a writer, and Carrie was a talented miniaturist, whose dollhouse is still on view at the Museum of the City of New York. I have to take a sidebar here to talk about the dollhouse because it is an incredible treasure of modern art. Many of the Stettheimer's artist friends made tiny copies of their paintings and sculptures for the dollhouse, which is now noteworthy for such mini masterpieces as works by Marcel Duchamp, Alexandra Archipenko, Marguerite Zorak, George Bellows, Gaston Lachaise. The list goes on. It's really worth a visit. But I digress. It's very difficult to not get lost in the exciting, glamorous, creative world of the Stettheimer sisters. But I'm going to focus back on Florine Stettheimer, because that is the subject of today's talk. Because Stettheimer was relieved from the financial pressures of selling her work, her artistic practice remained a private pursuit. She once said, quote, "Letting people have your paintings is like letting them wear your clothes." For these reasons, her art can be intensely intimate. Her paintings depict family, close friends, favorite places, and dreamlike settings. Appraised as a group, her work suggests a coded personal mythology. Flowers are a regular feature in these personal images, such as this unconventional and intimate family portrait. Behind an oversized arrangement of 3 enormous blooming flowers, her family members are not only clearly identifiable, but represented in a way that reflects each figure's individual character. In terms of her style, Stettheimer was influenced by diverse artists and cultures. In addition to her appreciation for Matisse, she also admired Japanese prints, Persian miniatures, and early Renaissance paintings. These influences can all be felt in some aspects of the color and rhythm and decorative patterning that characterize her work. Stettheimer's paintings are also rooted in the European symbolist tradition, and some have observed parallels between her work and that of the symbolist painter Odilon Redon. This is particularly clear in a comparison between Stettheimer's Russian Bank of 1921 and a work from the Fine Arts Museum's collection, which is Redon's Vase of Flowers, which you see here on the right. Between her tender portraits and pageants of Manhattan life, Stettheimer painted arresting still life bouquets in her distinctive candy-colored palette. These bouquets have deep biographical significance, as Stettheimer took great pleasure in making arrangements for her own enjoyment. She presents compelling evidence of her love for bouquets in her early nude self-portrait of 1915, a personal reinterpretation of Titian's Venus of Urbino and Manet's Olympia. Here we see Stettheimer's self-portrait, which is noteworthy due to its status as one of art history's rare nude self-portraits by a woman artist. She painted this work at 44 years old. Lying down alone and independent, she celebrates herself with a bouquet of flowers that she holds in the air, a bouquet that she likely made herself and gifted to herself. Stettheimer also enjoyed decorating with flowers. Contemporary photographs of her Bryant Park studio show multiple flower arrangements placed throughout the space. As wherever you can see another room, you can also see another group of flowers. Stettheimer's birthday bouquets were particularly noteworthy. Her annual birthday ritual involved picking a bouquet of seasonal flowers, and she would note this event in her journals and paint the arrangement for posterity. For example, on her 61st birthday in 1932, she painted herself this bouquet of flowers featuring petunias, cactus dahlias, pom-pom dahlias, and delphinium. She also included a self-portrait at the lower right, showing herself arranging flowers while wearing persimmon-colored high heels. I know a lot of you out there have been busy arranging flowers with us during Bouquets to Art online, and I'd love to know if any of you were doing that work while wearing similar shoes. Stettheimer was also a theatrical designer, and some of these floral works include curtain elements, suggesting theatrical performances in the form of bouquets. This use of props and still life staging makes these paintings almost seem like private theatrical events that the artist choreographed for her own pleasure. Finally, she was so talented in so many areas. Stettheimer also wrote poetry, and she often invoked flowers and floral themes in her work. In her anthropomorphic poem, Revolt of the Violet, she gives some insight into her empathetic identification with flowers, which she imbues with their own consciousness. So I have the poem up here in her own handwriting, and I will read it aloud. The poem reads, "This is a vulgar age," sighed the violet. "Why must humans drag us into their silly lives? They treat us as attributes, as symbols, and make us fade. Stink." With its varied and rich associations, Still Life with Flowers exemplifies Stettheimer's ability to turn a simple bouquet into something emotional and monumental. Slightly abstracted, her arrangements privilege her own subjectivity and her various intimate associations with the floral theme. This work is extravagant and it is personal. The descriptors extravagant and personal might also conjure associations with the flower paintings of Georgia O'Keeffe. Of course, we can't talk about flower paintings without talking about O'Keeffe. Interestingly, she was actually friends with the Stettheimer sisters. It's said that she was very fond of outgoing Eddie and shy Florine, and the women maintained a correspondence for many years. O'Keeffe's monumental, closely cropped flowers may seem worlds apart from Stettheimer's idiosyncratic and theatrical tabletop still lifes. However, in the words of curator Georgiana Olyeric, quote, both artists shared a revolutionary sense of monumentality as well as a playful seriousness in their approach to their subject matter. Petunias was inspired by a patch of purple flowers that O'Keeffe first planted at Lake George in New York's Adirondack region in the summer of 1925. The DeYoung work is one of about a dozen depictions of those plants painted from various sizes and perspectives. In the DeYoung work, O'Keeffe's magnified flowers fill the canvas without directional orientation, each petal animated with velvety texture and crisp contours. Featuring 6 blossoms posed at different angles and at various stages of blossoming, it evokes the movement of a single flower through space and time. So how did O'Keeffe come to plant these flowers at Lake George? O'Keeffe met Alfred Stieglitz in 1916 when she visited his gallery 291 to see an exhibition of works by Marston Hartley. He was an internationally acclaimed photographer with an avant-garde gallery. She was a talented artist and art teacher, practically unknown at 28 years old. Their lives became intertwined. From 1918 to 1934, O'Keeffe made regular visits with Stieglitz to his family's property on Lake George. The estate became a source of lasting inspiration and a treasured retreat from the bustle of New York City. O'Keeffe typically stayed at Lake George from spring to fall. There, she continued to find new subjects while walking all around the bucolic setting of the Stieglitz property. She enjoyed spending time on the wooded hillsides and hiking up Prospect Mountain to take in the spectacular view of the lake. At Lake George, O'Keeffe also found abundant orchards and flower beds. Still life subjects were all around her, literally ripe for picking. She collected the flowers, fruits, and leaves that caught her eye, and she painted still lifes exploring their organic forms. She was particularly drawn to the shape of apples. As Stieglitz described in one letter, quote, she has the apple fever. With her interests in nature and the Lake George landscape, O'Keeffe befriended the chief gardener, Donald Davidson, who was known to some as Mr. Flower. In Davidson, O'Keeffe found a like-minded person who was also interested in the smallest natural details of the estate. They would spend hours gardening together, tending the fruit trees and flower beds. And as you can see in this photo of the friends pruning trees together, O'Keeffe is holding a giant saw. Together, O'Keeffe and Davidson also selected plants for the property. Petunias may signal the influence of Luther Burbank's dramatically illustrated seed catalogs, which they consulted together while choosing plants for the orchards and gardens. In the DeYoung painting, O'Keeffe's central petunia is presented facing directly forward, much like the flower in this Burbank image of the hybrid Nicotunia blossom. O'Keeffe's flowers are arranged against an ambiguous monochrome background, also in a manner echoing the Burbank photographs. This composition also reminds me of Van Dyck's portrait of King Charles I in 3 positions. So stay with me. This is going to be fun. This unusual portrait, which depicts the king from 3 angles, aimed to give the fullest and most useful descriptive view of its subject. And it was sent to Rome to be used as a reference work for the Italian sculptor Bernini, who was planning to create a marble bust of the king. Van Dyck was interested in capturing different views of the same subject at the same time, and O'Keeffe's flowers can be similarly read as a portrait of a single flower shown from a variety of angles. Of course, you can also interpret this work as a chronological study, showing the progress of a single purple petunia as it blooms. The composition also invites interpretation as a matter-of-fact document of 6 flowers as O'Keeffe saw them in the garden. The magnification of the flowers can also be linked with the practice of the photographer Paul Strand, who was a close personal friend and a fellow member of the Stieglitz Circle. Strand's earlier works, such as this still life on my slide, may have had some influence on O'Keeffe's own compositional strategies. Coincidentally, just as O'Keeffe embarked on her still life experiments at Lake George, Strand was working on his own radical still lifes while staying at his family's summer cottage in Connecticut. The two artists had first met in 1917, and O'Keeffe later confided in the photographer, quote, "I believe I've been looking at things and seeing them as I thought you might photograph them. Isn't that funny, making Strand photographs for myself in my head?" Of course, O'Keeffe's achievements in this mode were singular. Inspired in part by Lake George and her personal experiences and friendships, these paintings came from a desire to share her way of seeing nature. In the 1930s, she wrote of her desire to paint the humble flower enlarged and up close. Quote, "I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking time to look at it. I will make even busy New Yorkers take time to see what I see of flowers." Thank you so much for joining me today as we celebrate Bouquets to Art. I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with these two magnificent examples of floral modernism. I've certainly missed them over the past few months, and I look forward to seeing you back at the De Young when we reopen. In the meantime, thank you, and please continue to enjoy Bouquets to Art online.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing these fabulous stories with us. I really enjoyed that. And I can't wait until the museums can safely reopen so I can spend more time with these works with this new knowledge. On the topic of flowers, where have you been in nature? Where have you been getting your nature and flower fix during shelter in place?
Oh, that's a great question because nature has become a huge part of my life during shelter in place. I've developed an addiction to early morning nature walks, and I'm very lucky. I live not too far from Mount Sutro, so most mornings you can find me around 7 a.m. clambering around Mount Sutro and taking in the eucalyptus. But on my walks to Mount Sutro, I've also been really enjoying my Google Lens app, which has been really helpful learning how to identify native California plants that I didn't know well before this time in our lives. So making the best of things, getting early morning walks, and trying to learn more about native plants while I'm doing it. That's been a huge part of my day since we've been home.
So let's get into the Q&A portion. And if you have a question for Lauren, please leave a comment. One question we had is, do you have a past Bouquets to Art favorite bouquet?
Oh, favorite bouquet? Yes, oh gosh, no. I mean, there's so many that it's hard to pick, but I believe Richard Mayhew is a favorite artist. His Rhapsody is a treasure in the collection, and the colors in Mayhew's painting are so arresting that they always invite incredible floral responses. So every year, the arrangement in front of Mayhew's Rhapsody is a rhapsody unto itself. So that comes to mind. But last year, I was also really tickled by, I think it was one of the responses to, I think it was Mrs. Henry Benbridge in Gallery 21. That was really striking. That was one that I photographed.
Another question is, can you share more resources where people can find out about the studies?
Yes. Just a couple of years ago, there was a fantastic exhibition about Florine Stettheimer at the Jewish Museum in New York. And the accompanying catalog is full of amazing illustrations and beautiful stories. So highly recommend finding the catalog from the Jewish Museum exhibition. It's also interesting to note that a lot of her papers ended up at the Beinecke Library at Yale. And you can search through the digital holdings at the Beinecke online, and you can find all sorts of treasures, like the poem I showed in Stettheimer's own handwriting that was online as a digital resource from the Beinecke. And they have all sorts of amazing treasures. So spend some time online and there's plenty to discover.
We have a couple of people who said they did see that exhibition in New York, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
This might be a tricky question. Do you know if Georgia O'Keeffe was influenced at all by Cézanne? Those apple still life paintings really remind me of his work.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarity and resonance between her apples and pears and Cézanne's apples and pears. And it's difficult to not see them speaking to each other. Off the top of my head, I don't have a beautiful quote that sums it up, but it's really exciting to remember that she didn't learn how to paint in a vacuum, that she comes from a history of art. She also, in addition to seeing influences from Cézanne in her work, one might also find it interesting to know that she studied under William Merritt Chase, who's a great American painter who also was very accomplished in still life painting. And she won a prize as an art student for her still life work. So she was very much aware of her the antecedents in still life painting. And, she helps to demonstrate in art, as is quite often the case, in order to be revolutionary, you have to know where you're coming from. And she really, I think she knew her histories of still life in order to keep pushing that dialogue forward into the future, yes.
And I love the collection connection that you made between her work and the Redon piece that we have hanging at the Legion of Honor. It's amazing that she's hanging among the people that she studied.
Oh yeah, Stettheimer and Redon definitely sing with each other. I don't know if that work has been on view as recently as the museum closure, but we love to bring things out and change them around. So hopefully it is on view at some point.
I think it is. So that's another thing to look forward to when the museums reopen. Not a question, but a really nice comment. Nini wrote in, loved the poem. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. Stettheimer wrote a lot of poetry. A lot of her poems and paintings were never meant to be seen by us. She wanted it all to be destroyed after she died. But fortunately, her sister disobeyed her and made sure that her poems were kept published. Her paintings were distributed to museums across the United States. So we have this other studies to thank for our ability to see her poems today.
Another question. Thank you for this presentation, Lauren. Do you have any favorite contemporary artists who work with flowers?
Yeah, so I got this question on Wednesday during my webinar, and I think it's a great question and a good reminder that still life and flower subjects are still a big part of our lives. And I would say one of my favorite still life artists who works in the subject in our time is Jonas Wood. And the reason that I call him out is because there's a really special extra dimension there, because he is married to a famous ceramicist, and her name is Shio Kusaka. And his still life paintings incorporate vessels made by his wife. So when you're looking at his abstracted and flattened still life paintings, sometimes you're also seeing images of one artist appreciating the work of another artist, and the fact that there is a romantic relationship and an artist's relationship contained in those still life paintings, I find very moving. So I'll count him as one of my favorites.
Yeah, I have gonna definitely dig into their work after. I think that's all the questions that we have today. We have so many like thank yous and exciting remarks, and a lot of people are saying that they are feeling inspired to go painting and to go experience nature, and that's wonderful. We're so happy to hear that.
That's great. Thank you.
Before we log off, do you want to share with our viewers at home what you and the American Art Department have been working on during Shelter in Place?
Sure. We have been taking this time to take a step back and think about the permanent collection and the permanent galleries. So usually on the normal museum schedule, some of you out there might know we work so hard on our exhibitions, and the Fine Arts Museums, we're so proud of our incredible exhibition program. But you may also know that it moves really quickly, and we do huge projects in very short periods of time. So being at home during Shelter in Place, we have a rare opportunity to catch our breath and think really carefully and sensitively about our permanent collection and the objects on view in our permanent galleries. And we're thinking about labels, we're thinking about presentations, we're thinking about future publications and display strategies, because we have this rare opportunity to think about the objects that we are responsible for and that we care for. So we're taking advantage of this time.
And what are you most looking forward to when we can get back into the office?
Personally, I'm very much looking forward to sitting in the sculpture garden. I'm really missing my regular spot on my regular bench where I like to see Miro and Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth. And it's usually my moment of peace in the regular workday, and I'm missing my little moment of quiet in the garden. So I'm excited to get back to the sculpture garden as soon as possible.
I completely agree. I love spending my lunch there, popping in a 30-minute podcast and just taking in the quiet sounds. And I also really enjoy watching all our visitors experience this beautiful space that we get to have to ourselves every day.
Yeah.
Really nice. Okay, well, that's all for our Bouquets to Art program today. Thank you so much for bringing the beauty of art and flowers to all of us at home. I appreciate it, and I know our viewers at home are deeply grateful as well.
Well, thanks, Joyce. This was really fun. I hope everyone's enjoying Bouquets to Art online.
For sure. We still have more videos ready for you on Saturday and Sunday, so tune in through the rest of the weekend. Bye, everyone.
Bye.